We're speaking to Professor Dr. Hajah Rugayah Hashim this morning. She is the professor at the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies at UITM. Thank you so much, Professor, for speaking to us on the Light Breakfast.
Sure. I'm also the Deputy Rector for Research and Innovation at UITM Cawangan Selangor, Campus Puncak Alam.
Thank you for that.
All
now,
right.
Professor, we saw your research online and you wrote a paper about the importance of family dynamics and the environment where siblings are actually brought up to actually determine the factors that cause sibling rivalry. Can you tell us a little bit about the results of that research and that paper?
Okay, that was, like I said before, is a 6-year study, and not 6 years taking. I started it in 2014. 2015, I got a grant from the Ministry of Higher Education. It was for a fundamental study, but the basis of it was we wanted, under the theme for sociology, the cluster, we as social scientists, we wanted to research something that is novel in Malaysia. Right after doing quite a bit of literature review, we found out that there is no such policy with regards to any domestic abuse with regards to sibling, fighting among themselves, the quarrels. Whereas for nuclear families, that's very important because everything starts at the family level, at the micro level. Okay, so the motivation for that one was also because of the media reports. If you were to check that out on any of the mainstream newspapers, you'll find that there have been a lot of cases where brothers and sisters, they fight among themselves, and that has escalated to something that involves, fatalities.
Wow, okay.
So that one, there are terms for that. We have sororicide and we have fratricide. So
okay.
That's another paper that I also wrote. Okay.
All right. So what was the motivation for this research project on sibling relationship, or as you call it, sibship?
Yeah, sibship is the combined term for it. The motivation was because, number one, we've been doing a lot of reading on the mainstream newspapers. We found out that almost every other week there are incidences of siblings, fighting among themselves for whatever reasons. And at the same time, when we checked that out in literature on the Scopus and WS databases, there was quite a substantial number of literature that allowed us to go through with this sociology topic.
Okay.
Especially for Malaysia and for Southeast Asia, in fact, because we come from a very, very conservative society where we don't tell everyone about the skeleton in the closet. This one here, it has been ongoing. In fact, it started during the times of Adam and Eve. We have Abel and Cain. Okay.
Yeah.
In the famous people out there in Hollywood, for example, the Kardashian sisters, they fight among themselves. And if you were to look into the billionaires, you see the Ambani brothers even fight among themselves. So those are, we look at whether it's going to be healthy or not.
Okay.
But in my research, I look at the negative aspect. How it's going to affect the society holistically if we allow this to carry on.
Yeah.
But shouldn't sibling rivalry end at some stage where it doesn't? Like my brother and I, we argued like crazy when we were kids, but when we got to be like in our 20s, we started respecting each other. Sure, we dig at each other a bit, but it's not harmful, right? Shouldn't it stop at a certain age?
No, based on our research, it doesn't stop at any age at all. In fact, we can easily forgive, but we can't forget. So those are reservations. I'd like to have a disclaimer here to let you know that me and my other researcher, Hashim Ahmed, we are not psychologists. We are not shrinks. We are just social science researchers. So that disclaimer in itself allows us to research in depth, where we find that the sibling rivalry for certain, communities, it doesn't end there, even in adulthood. Okay. And you have to take into consideration the demographics as well. Some siblings are not normal, so we have those that are autistic, stuff like that. So those are elements or factors that can allow for sibling fighting among themselves, the tiffs, the quarrels, how it's going to escalate or how it's going to, return to normal. That all depends on the person itself.
Wow. Speaking of which, how much of this sibling rivalry is caused by something that you are born with? Like, for example, you are just competitive in nature, or like you said, autistic, or someone with an egotistic personality, rather than upbringing in that sense.
That's the bad seed. Sometimes when we started our literature review, we found that for animals, it all started even in the womb. So even for families, it is also dependent on the socio-economy aspect. So like I said before, for social science research, you still have to look at the demographics. Even people with enormous wealth, they still fight among themselves. So we can't name names here, but even those who are poor, they still do fight among themselves. In Malaysia, if you look even at for simplest of things, they fight even because of a TV remote control, and they start striking each other using knives and machetes and whatnot. Okay, so it ends in fatalities.
Okay. So it is inborn, as in there will probably be one sibling in your family that is more violent or more angry, that will cause sibling rivalry to just spiral out of control.
Those emotional parts usually are contained because of tradition, culture, religion, mores. But we are all humans, okay? There are times when we flare, we snap at even the simplest of things. Therefore, I cannot say, like I said before, I'm not a shrink. So when we research, we found out that usually substance abuse has also something to do with siblings fighting among themselves. But the main reason, if you look at my research findings, wealth has also got to do with the fights, usually. For Malaysia, that is.
So the wealthier you are, the more fights you get into with your siblings.
No, not necessarily. But money has got to do, finance, especially now during the pandemic, it has a lot to do with something that's going to flare, something that's going to start the catalyst to a fight. So you see here, like I said before, ego is also number one in play.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you look at all those dynasties in historical times, greed and power will be the demise of all those kingdoms.
Okay. But I mean, as parents of young children right now, I would see sibling rivalry as something that is normal. When they bicker, when they quarrel, and when they, snatch things from each other. Is it something normal and to be expected when you have more than one child in a household?
Yep. It is normal if you have more than one child in a household. Of course, an only child who's going to be fighting with him or her, but the more kids you have, you have more siblings in the family, the chances are there are going to be some sort of jealousy and envy involved. But at an early age, it's not going to show that much. But later, as they grow up, especially when they started working and they have families of their own and they have elderly parents, things will start to crop up.
I think the more,
kids,
go ahead.
It's okay. It's normal for them to be fighting, but this is where parents have also to intervene. Okay, to tell them it's not good to be starting physical abuse, slapping, or just punching. It's not, don't start the fight.
Okay. Yeah, I was just about to ask you, like, how can parents from a young age teach their children to not fight with each other so that it doesn't escalate into adulthood?
when parents intervene, that's another area where I'm not someone who is into family psychology, but I can say that when parents intervene at that age and start talking to them, communicating is very, very important. Communicating to them that if you are, you love each other very much, the bonding starts there. Then even as you reach the golden age, you are still going to be a lovey-dovey with your sibling. But if parents do not intervene, especially working parents are just too busy and couldn't be bothered and come back retired, then it all starts there. As they grow up, they want material things. If you give one sibling, an iPhone 12 and the other sibling only gets an iPhone 6, this is going to start.
Yeah.
World War III is going to start.
Actually, Professor, if you don't mind me asking, because you mentioned age, right?
Yeah.
Is rivalry, sibling rivalry, much more apparent if the kids are kind of closer in age, or there was one maybe
8
10 years
years
apart, or
gap or
exactly, yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter for in my research, even with that large age gap, more than 5 years, more than 10 years, as they go up, each and everyone has the mind of their own. So, when they started comparing, that's the worst part of it. They start comparing, why are you giving her, especially for parents? They do choose. There are favoritism among parents. You see, if you have a cuter child, then fair child, in fact, you're gonna love him or her more. So when they start having that kind of being mollycoddling the one that they prefer, then it's gonna start. That's where the seed is sowed for sibling rivalry.
So
But I
parents
thought
have
parents,
parents have a big role in sowing this seed as well
Mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm,
rivalry.
I thought
mm-hmm.
parents don't have favorite kids. That's what they always say,
I
right?
don't. I only
No,
have
no.
2.
They do, in fact, but just don't show it, because when they start showing, but we are only human. There are times, when one kid is just so nice to us and we're coming back from work tired, then there is a show of favoritism, but at the same time, you just don't show it to the other one.
Yeah. Okay.
You got to
You
be
have to be
fair.
tactful about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As they grow up, they observe more. But with all these gadgets and whatnot, usually are so immersed playing games, and that usually is another sidetrack. But as the kids grow older, parents have to mediate, especially when the rivalry extends into their 40s and into their 50s. Parents have got to mediate, not to choose which child that they want to go and say, I'm sorry. Saying I'm sorry is a difficult thing. You hear the Elton John song. So again, even in real life, that's very hard.
Yeah.
Apologizing.
Okay. So in your opinion, Professor, what should parents do to not cause this unhealthy rift between siblings?
First of all, it depends on demographics. Like I said, is very important. It all depends on the family. Sometimes you have 2 kids, a pigeon pair, one boy, one girl. But some people may have 8 in the family, like the Brady Bunch. They do fight among themselves. That's normal.
Yeah.
Depending on who or what the situation is. If you have parents, education is also very important. If you have parents who allow for them to speak out and be frank, be honest between and among the siblings, that will take care of clearing the air. But if not, it's going to be very difficult, where the one child may accuse the parents, you are always favoring the youngest one.
Mm.
The bongsu in Malay, usually
Yeah.
that's the case.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be saying that this is stereotype, but when you have a younger child, usually the parents are more loving of that younger child.
Mm-hmm. So besides comparing, like you said earlier, Professor, what shouldn't the parents do so that they can keep this sibling rivalry at bay?
Shouldn't do, depends on the age of the children. As they grow older, they should observe, but at the same time, they should try to talk it out among themselves. This is where family bonding is very important. Having a meal together is very, very important, where you talk it out among yourselves. Don't keep that in your heart, because once you have vengeance and revenge in your heart, it's not going to bode well as you grow older. You're going to start to drift apart.
Mm-hmm. In your research, Professor, have you seen any like cases where, where siblings actually go through life without actually getting upset at one another, and they're one big happy family, even with their extended family?
You see,
Can that happen?
Mine is a one-off research where I need to do a second one if I have the time. But if we look at the statistics that I have in my paper, you will realize that the age of my respondents, they try as much as possible to hide. It means that when they answered my questions, open-ended questions, they were trying to hide because they want to show that they have negative feelings towards their sibling. So this is where a second research would come in very handy to support the first research findings. Okay, so back to your questions here. Parents, I'm a parent myself. It's quite difficult because when in the stages of life, okay, when they are in primary school, you can still handle them. Secondary, teenagers is getting more and more difficult. But depending on the tradition and the culture and the mores, okay, once they start getting married, for those in the Western, once you are on your own, then we don't, interfere with your life.
Yeah.
You want to come back, you fine. But you see, for here in Malaysia, especially for the Malays, you have something called the Hajah Rugayah, where everybody, even in the Chinese culture, we have
Chinese New Year.
Where everybody gathers together. This is the bonding part, which is very, very important.
Yeah.
Okay. When you don't communicate for years and years, that is the Grand Canyon of rifts.
Okay. But as a parent yourself, Professor, you were saying earlier, what do you do when your children start squabbling with each other?
Usually I leave them alone. But when they start, getting physical, then I will interfere.
Okay.
And then I will get them to sit down and I'll tell them, okay, how many sisters do you have? How many brothers do you have? When I'm no longer in this world and when I'm gone, who's going to take care of you?
Yeah.
You make them see sense. That is for normal kids. What about for those that are, suffering from, say, autism, all other neuro disadvantages of a normal kid. So that's going to be very, very different. But still, you have to sit them down and talk it out with them, try to make them see reason.
Yeah.
Especially now when they are so immersed with gadgets, they don't do anything else. They don't even
play with each other, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually,
even when we have gatherings, you realize, everybody's hanging on to their cell phone.
Yeah.
They don't talk to one another. That's very bad.
Is that worse for sibling rivalry, you think, Professor? Just everyone being on their own?
You see, there's another factor here, the touching part. Now we can't touch one another. But in actual fact, when we start shaking hands or salam, that also creates a kind of bonding. Especially among siblings, that they should, Sometimes, like I said, we are in a conservative society now where it's difficult for some family members to say, I love you. You see?
Yeah.
You get that?
Yeah. Very traditional and very conservative. Yeah. So will it work if, let's say, they fight? I've seen this before. I've seen this being done before by other parents. When their kids fight, they put them in a huge shirt and ask them to hug each other inside the shirt.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. But do you see that in Malaysian families?
No, never. Yeah. Okay.
If you were to slice them into, say, metro areas, suburban areas, and rural areas, you don't see that happening, putting them in a big shirt.
Yeah.
But putting them on a sampan, and if you don't start rowing together, you won't find land.
That's an interesting one.
But Professor, is there such a thing as like in some
Sorry,
cases?
JD, you sound like Thanos now.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
So what was your question again?
Yeah, he wanted
So,
to ask a question. Okay.
Is there such a thing as healthy sibling rivalry where they seem like they're being close to being they're not fighting, but they're very competitive with each other? Is there such a thing as healthy sibling rivalry?
Yes, yes, there is. I will consider that there is, especially if you look at in business, family business. If the siblings don't work together, how are they gonna achieve, not marginalize, maximization of profits?
Okay.
They need one another. Who else can they trust?
Yeah.
So they need to trust a sibling.
Okay. But what happens, Professor, when you have adult children and they're all married with their own families, and then they have cut ties with the rest of the family
Mhm.
because of just, some misunderstanding or competition or just
Someone said
arguments
something.
between them, is there anything that parents can still do at that point when they've actually left the household and don't want to have any ties with the rest of the family?
Parents are the central for all happy family. Parents, you see. So if they cut ties, but they are still in touch with the parents, that's good. Sometimes a wound takes a long time to heal, the emotional wound. Even if you were to look into some of the theories, in order to avoid more fights, you stay away. Let it cool. Time
Mhm.
will heal.
How long though, Doc? What if it's like 15 years, 20 years and you haven't seen
That one.
this brother of yours, you don't even know what they're up to?
It's difficult for me to say. I have to do more research on that. That's a very hard question to answer.
But I mean, personally, Professor, if you don't mind us asking, do you have siblings or are you still in touch with all of your
Yeah,
siblings?
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. I am in touch with them.
Did you
And do
have
We
you
have
have like
something
close
rivalry?
called the
relationship?
WhatsApp. We have something called the WhatsApp group.
That's a saving grace, like in
Yeah.
modern technology, I think, the WhatsApp group.
Mhm. It's very important. Like I said before, communication is key now, since we can't, go from one state to another, the SOP and stuff. So it's very, very important for us to communicate. But sometimes we don't communicate as much. That's understandable when we are so busy with work and family. Okay, so if you understand that this is a sweet situation with you and you mirror that for your siblings family, that would work.
Okay.
So we done?
JD wanted to ask a question just now, right?
No. I'm good.
Okay. No, you were asking something. I wanted to ask that also. Did you ever compete with your siblings when you were younger, Professor?
Yes. Why are you putting the ball in my court?
We
That
want
is
just we just
normal.
want we just
That
want
is
a
normal.
we just want a personal opinion and
Uh-huh.
what you think your parents did right with you and your siblings to make you have this strong bond even until now.
We competed with education.
Mm,
See who gets the most A's in SPM, who goes to university. Almost all of us did,
yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So who studied what, etc., etc. So
Okay.
more than that, I'm not going to vouch on reserve person.
Okay, but I'm sure your parents did something right for you to
Yep,
for all
Alhamdulillah,
of
they
you
did.
to be still a tight knit family.
Mhm.
Are they all
Super
Any
professors as
supportive
well?
out
The
there.
rest of them? Your
Nope,
siblings?
I'm the only one.
Right. So nobody goes like, my research was better than your research.
No. When you've reached Maslow's hierarchy, you start to be like there's the Malay saying, the more that you learn, the more knowledge that you have to be humble.
Mm,
Okay,
yeah.
even with my socioeconomic research, where I have to go to the rural areas, I cannot compare the education level with that of the kampong people. Okay, and I have to be very, very humble, go down as low as I can, because at the end of the day, I just want to pick their brains.
Mm.
For example, there's this family in a park where I am researching on how they can start doing online business, because they produce this very, very indigenous paste that is only available in that kampong. So you just have to be very humble when
Okay.
you are doing sociology research and socioeconomic research. So I'm also into things that the buzzword that they are saying right now is the sustainability, the inclusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So it all are in tandem with the national agenda, where we got to help those who are in need of help.
All right. Well, any last words, Professor, to parents with children who are just constantly at odds with one another?
Uh, well, practice anger management, be humble. Life is short, right? So, move on. If some people can accept you as you are, move on. But what I want to say for my last part is to acknowledge the funding that we received from the Ministry of Higher Education, where we managed to write papers and present them and share
Mm.
with some of our Southeast Asian counterparts. And we got seriously good feedbacks, because they too experienced this sibling rivalry, where we need to have certain policies, not just child abuse. We have to have information reporting policies, because sometimes if the sibling or the child is traumatized, where can he or she go?
Yeah.
We don't have that alley, for them to go. And then you have still to look at where in the rural areas they don't reach much, and they don't have smartphones because they can't afford it. But who can they go and talk about it? Because at the
Mm.
end of the day, some of them run away. You have all these social ills cropping up.
Is this considered domestic violence if like siblings fight among themselves?
Yes, it can escalate to uh, s- um, domestic violence. Like I said before in the early part of the interview, there is something called sororicide and fratricide. And if you were to even Google the word sibling rivalry, fight, and fatality, you will see that some of them ended in deaths.
Oh man. Never knew that it can end up so badly
Yeah.
and so
Before,
serious.
yep.
Yeah.
Before I talked to you just now, I did quite a bit of research just to update on the currency of the news. Oh, it's all over the place.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be in the metro areas, even in the rural areas, especially in substance abuse. They start killing you just because they need money.
Mm. Scary.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a bigger burden on the parents' shoulder as well now, I think, to
Mhm.
make sure that this does not escalate past, violence.
Yep. The SIP ship for my other research is on parental abuse,
Okay. That's a totally different story now.
but it's in the family.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody's focusing on the child being abused and neglected and maltreated. What about those? You see the baby boomers forming huge portion of the population right now. So what's going to happen if they start having elderly abuse and parental
Yeah.
abuse and stuff
Yeah.
like that? It has happened.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor,
You're
for
most
for
welcome.
telling us a little bit more about your research so that we can understand how bad sibling rivalry can get and what we can do as parents to help stifle that, I guess. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.